was actually the first one? Because you said this was a later version. Was the first one much longer? Or?
No, the first ones weren't very long. They came out in 1935, and they were pretty much very similar to design of the non-curved watches that they were making at the same time, because they weren't sure that the curve movement, the curve case was really going to take off. So they were very conservative and cautious about the design of the case. And it wasn't until second or third year, 1936, 1937, that Gruen really started making the watches very long.
Yeah.
Very curved, with fancier dials, with markers and numbers, two-tone dials. That's when the Curvex really took off.
And it was considered very popular in Pennsylvania.
It was.
Was there any wait list that you know of?
Not that I know of, but they sold a lot, and that really kind of stayed Gruen in the late 30s. The Depression is still going on. I mean, people are still out of work, but they were able to produce these watches that people would buy, and they were $50, $55 in 1938, 39. And there were still enough people that had $50 or $55, $60 to buy one. And that's what saved Gruen.
Yeah.
Till the war came along.
In the gold cases, so they stuck more with gold fill cases and
absolutely the
Russian.
Yeah.
Was that really when those actually started getting put in? Did they start as almost always gold runs?
They were always making gold fill watches. Even in the teens and 20s, the roaring 20s, when people had a lot of money, there was still a market for watches that were $40 and $50. Elgin commonly offered watches that were $16, $17 in the 20s, $19.
It was just a way to be price competitive.
It was. And at that price point, you got to have a 7-jewel movement instead of a 17-jewel movement.
Yeah.
You have to have a chrome-filled or a gold-filled case as opposed to a higher quality gold-filled case or a solid gold or platinum case.
Yeah.
Hamilton, up until 1934, their minimum price for a men's wristwatch was $50. They never sold a watch less than $50. So they were very commonly thought of as a higher tier American watch.
Yeah.
Simply based on the price point was so much higher than it was for Elgin, for Boulevard, for Gruen, even for Illinois.
Yeah, that's interesting.
You get to 1934, sales for all the watch companies are much depressed, like the economy. The economy was not recovering in 1933 and 34. Those are the 32, 33, 34 were the worst years.
Yeah.
And these companies, they were reducing the work week from 6 days a week to 5 days a week to 4 days a week to 3 days a week, occasionally closing the factories for 2-3 weeks at a time because the work wasn't there. The demand for the product was not there.
And that makes those pieces probably around an area.
It does, especially for the higher end watches, because they were still making watches, solid gold watches in 33, 34, and 35, but the consumer demand for those watches was
zero.
Yeah. There were Hamiltons from 1933, 1934 that were priced at $150.
Wow.
And we have sales records for every year. Some of those watches, they would sell 30 or 40 of those watches per year.
That's globally.
Yeah, even they sold in Canada as well. So you're talking the entire United States and Canada. They might, for one of the solid gold models, they might sell 30 in 1 year.
That's crazy, yeah. Wow. It showed how big the struggle actually was, but then it creates something of a major scarcity.
Yeah, but there were still people that were, driving Cadillacs and Duesenbergs that wanted a $150 watch, and for them it was nothing.
Yeah.
So they had to make those watches because even though the demand was very small, there's
always a market.
There's always a market for somebody's out there willing to pay, spend some money.
That's I would say probably, we're not really in a recession, but typical economic reality of ups and downs, you still always seem to have some sort of market for watches.
Absolutely.